My husband tried to give away our baby to his sister because I was unfit to be a mother. I gave him two choices. The hospital bracelet was still on my wrist, sticky with the residue of 3 days of adhesive, when I walked into the nursery at 6 in the morning and found my sister-in-law Solange standing over the crib with my 4-day-old daughter pressed against her chest, whispering into her downy hair the words, "Don't worry, my love. Mommy is going to let you come home with me very soon." I had not heard her come into the house. My husband Caspian had given her a key 3 weeks before the birth without telling me, and she had let herself in at 5:45 in the morning while I was sleeping off the cesarean section that had nearly killed both of us. My daughter Renly was wearing a yellow onesie I had never seen before. There was a packed diaper bag on the changing table that did not belong to me. I'd been a labor and delivery nurse at Bellwether Regional Medical Center for 11 years when I met Caspian Ainsley Brooke at a fundraiser for the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, where he was donating proceeds from his architectural firm's annual gala. I was 34, he was 36, and he had been raised by his older sister Solange after their parents died in a small plane crash when he was 9 and she was 19. Solange had given up her own scholarship to Princeton to raise him, and Caspian spoke about her the way other men spoke about saints. We dated for 2.5 years. We married in a small ceremony at a vineyard. Solange gave a toast that made everyone cry. I believed, for a long time, that I was marrying into a family that knew how to love. Solange had never married. She was 46 now, the chief financial officer of a private equity firm, and she had spent 11 years undergoing every fertility treatment available before her reproductive endocrinologist had told her, at 43, that she had exhausted her options. She had taken it hard. She had taken it harder than I had ever seen anyone take anything. For almost 6 months, she had not left her apartment, and Caspian had spent every weekend with her, and I had supported him in that, because I was a labor and delivery nurse, and I had watched dozens of women receive that news, and I understood that grief like that did not have a timeline. What I had not understood at the time was that Solange's grief had a destination. The pregnancy had not been planned. Caspian and I had been married for 4 years. And had discussed children in the abstract, the way couples discuss them when both partners have careers they love, and no particular urgency. When I told him I was pregnant, his first reaction had been a long silence. And then he had said, "We should tell Solange tonight." We had told her over dinner at her apartment. She had cried. She had hugged me. She had told me she would be the best aunt the child had ever had. I had cried too, because I had wanted her to be happy. Because I had felt guilty that my body had done easily what her body had refused to do for over a decade. I should have noticed then the way she did not let go of my hand. By the 3rd month of my pregnancy, Solange had begun coming over 3 nights a week. She brought soup. She brought books on infant development. She brought a bassinet she had ordered from a boutique in Milan, hand-carved walnut, $2,600, which she had wrapped in white silk and set up in our nursery before I had even chosen a wall color. Caspian had been delighted. I had told myself she was processing her grief in a healthy way, that helping prepare for a niece or nephew was good for her. I told myself that the way she touched my belly without asking, the way she narrated to my unborn child what we were going to do together when we arrived, was sweet. I told myself a lot of things during those months that I should not have told myself. The first time I really felt the shift was at my baby shower in April. Solange had insisted on hosting it at her apartment. She had hired a calligrapher to do the place cards, and when I arrived I noticed that the banner over the dessert table read, "Welcome to Auntie Solange's garden," with my name nowhere on it. I let it go. I let a lot of things go that day, including the moment when Solange opened her gift to me, which turned out to be a designer maternity bag pre-packed with hospital supplies, and announced to the gathered guests that she had already arranged everything with the hospital because she knew exactly what the baby would need. Caspian had laughed. My mother, Rosalinde, had not. My mother had pulled me into the bathroom an hour later and asked me, very quietly, if I understood what was happening. I had not. Renly was born on the morning of June 19th at 6 pounds 11 ounces, after 31 hours of labor that had ended in an emergency cesarean when her heart rate had dropped to a level that had made my own colleagues' faces go pale. I had hemorrhaged in recovery. They had given me 4 units of blood. Dr. Imogen Beauchamp-Falaise, the OB who had delivered her, had told Caspian in the hallway that there had been a window of about 90 seconds, when she had thought she would lose us both. I had been told this later. I had been told a lot of things later. While I had been unconscious in recovery, my husband had called his sister, and his sister had been in the nursery with my newborn daughter within 40 minutes, and had not left her side for the entire 48 hours I had been on the postpartum floor. The nurses on my own unit had been gentle with me about it. One of them, my friend Octavia Mbatha Greer, who had been my charge nurse for 6 years, had come into my room on the second morning and closed the door behind her. She had told me, in her soft, careful voice, that she was not sure what was happening in my family, but that she had observed Solange behaving in ways that concerned her, and that Solange had asked the night nurse twice whether it would be possible for her to feed Renly a bottle to give the mother a break. I had not yet been able to breastfeed because of the hemorrhage. The lactation consultant had been working with me. Octavia had told the night nurse to refer all feeding decisions to me directly. I had thanked her. I had not yet understood why she was telling me. By the time we brought Renly home, I was still moving very slowly and was not permitted to lift more than 10 pounds. Caspian had taken 2 weeks of paternity leave. Solange had also, somehow, taken 2 weeks off and had moved a suitcase into our guest bedroom without asking. I had not had the energy to fight it. I had been grateful in those first days for the extra hands. I had been grateful when she did the laundry. I had been grateful when she made dinners. I had been grateful for almost 48 hours, until the morning I woke up at 3 and went into the nursery and found Solange sitting in the rocking chair with Renly nursing from a bottle she had warmed without asking me, my hand-expressed milk replaced with formula she had brought from her own apartment. I had not said anything that first night. I had taken Renly from her arms, and I had walked into the kitchen, and I had poured the rest of the formula down the sink. Solange had followed me. She had told me, in the calm, almost clinical voice she used when she was managing a board meeting, that I was clearly overwhelmed and that I should let her help. She had told me that I had not been sleeping enough and that the lactation consultant had told her my supply was not sufficient, which was a lie. The lactation consultant had told me the opposite. I had told Solange that I appreciated her help, but that I was Renly's mother and I would make decisions about Renly's feeding. She had smiled at me. She had said, "Of course." She had gone back to bed. The next morning, I had told Caspian that I needed Solange to go home. He had looked at me as if I had asked him to set the house on fire. He had told me that his sister had given up everything to raise him, and that I was being cold and ungrateful. He had told me that Solange was just trying to help because she could see I was struggling. I had told him I was not struggling, that I was recovering from a major surgery, and that there was a difference. He had told me I was being defensive. He had said that perhaps I was experiencing some postpartum mood changes. He had said this last part in the same calm, clinical voice his sister had used the night before, and that was the first moment I felt something shift in my chest, something cold and very still. I told myself again that I was overreacting. I told myself that Caspian loved me and that he was just worried, that his attachment to his sister was complicated but not malicious. I told myself that the past 48 hours had been intense and that we were all sleep-deprived. I held Renly against my chest and I rocked her in the nursery and I cried quietly into her hair. And I told myself that things would get better when Solange went home in 2 weeks. They did not get better. On day 6, I came out of the bathroom and found Solange on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in a hushed voice to someone she called by an unfamiliar name. And I caught the phrase primary caregiver paperwork before she saw me and ended the call. She had smiled at me. She had asked if I wanted tea. I did not say anything. I went into the guest bedroom while she was making the tea, and I went through her open laptop, which she had left on the bed, and I photographed every document I could open in under 3 minutes. There were emails to a family attorney. There were emails to a private nanny placement service in her own zip code. There was a document titled Renly Transition Plan that listed pediatricians in Solange's neighborhood, daycare facilities, and a calendar of introduction visits to her apartment beginning the week she was scheduled to fly home. I photographed everything. I closed her laptop exactly as I had found it. I went back to the kitchen. I drank the tea she had made me, and I smiled, and I told her it was delicious. Then I went into my own bedroom and I locked the door. I called my mother, Rosalinda, from the bathroom with the shower running. I told her, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear myself, what I had found on the laptop. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother, who was 68 years old and had been a federal prosecutor for 31 years before retiring, told me to do exactly 3 things. She told me to back up the photographs to an account Caspian did not have access to. She told me not to confront either Caspian or Solange about what I had found. She told me to call her colleague, a family attorney named Yanis Petrakis Whitlow, at 8 the following morning, and to tell him she had referred me. She told me she was getting on a plane that afternoon. I asked her if I was being paranoid. She said no. Yanis Petrakis Whitlow met me at his office on a Wednesday morning. He was in his late 50s, soft-spoken, with kind eyes, and a manila folder he opened in front of me before I had even sat down. He looked at the photographs on my phone. He read the documents twice. Then he leaned back in his chair and he told me, in the gentle voice of a man who had delivered this kind of news many times, that what I was describing was a recognizable pattern. He called it alienation grooming. He told me that what Solange and Caspian appeared to be constructing between them was a documented narrative designed to support an eventual claim of parental incapacity, after which a voluntary guardianship transfer to Solange could be portrayed as the family's mutual decision. He told me I needed to act now, while I still had the legal and physical custody of my own child. He told me 3 things needed to happen immediately. First, my mother needed to move into the house, which she was already doing. Second, I needed to begin documenting every interaction in real time, with dates, times, and witnesses. Third, I needed to be evaluated by an independent psychiatrist of my own choosing, immediately, so that I had a clean baseline mental health assessment on file before anyone else could try to manufacture one. He gave me the name of a perinatal psychiatrist named Dr. Cordelia Nziogwu Ashford, who was a faculty member at the university hospital and who had testified in custody matters more than 40 times as an expert witness. Yanis told me he would call her himself that afternoon to request an expedited intake. I thanked him. I asked him if I was going to lose my baby. He told me, no. Dr. Nziogwu Ashford saw me the next day. Her office was on the 4th floor of a brick medical building, with soft lighting and an oversized armchair I could sink into without my incision pulling. She was in her early 60s, with steady hands and a clinical manner that put me immediately at ease. She conducted a full perinatal mental health assessment, administered the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, and reviewed all of my obstetric records. At the end of the appointment, she sat down across from me and told me, in clear professional language, that I showed no clinical signs of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, or postpartum psychosis. She told me my bonding behavior with Renly, which she had observed during the 2nd hour of the appointment, was exceptionally healthy. She told me she would write a formal report. She told me she would testify if needed. I drove home with my mother in the passenger seat and Renly in her car seat in the back. I felt, for the first time in 2 weeks, like the floor underneath me was made of something solid. My mother had not stopped working since she had arrived. She had set up a small office in our spare bedroom. She had quietly photographed every receipt, every text, every interaction that could be documented. She had observed Solange feeding Renly a bottle of formula on day 8, against my explicit instructions, and she had filmed it from the doorway of the kitchen without Solange noticing. She had observed Caspian whispering to Solange in the back garden on day 9, after which Caspian had come inside and told me that I was looking very tired, and that perhaps Renly should sleep at Solange's apartment for a few nights. I had said no. I had said no in a voice that did not shake. Caspian had told me that I was overreacting, that I was sleep-deprived, that I was not thinking clearly. My mother had walked into the kitchen at exactly that moment and said, very pleasantly, "I think she is thinking very clearly, actually." Caspian had stared at her. He had not known my mother was still in the house. He had assumed she had left. He had assumed wrong about a great many things in the past 2 weeks. He had assumed that I had not noticed the way he and Solange were rearranging our lives. He had assumed that the woman he had married, who had spent 11 years watching other women in their most vulnerable moments, would not recognize when she herself was being managed. On the 10th day, while Solange was at a business meeting she had scheduled in our city, my mother and I packed Renly's things and we drove to a hotel. We checked in under my mother's maiden name. Yanis Petrakis Whitlow filed for emergency temporary sole custody that afternoon, citing the documented coercive pattern, the unauthorized formula feeding against medical advice, the alienation grooming behaviors, and the unauthorized transition plan recovered from Solange's laptop. He attached Dr. Nziogwu Ashford's mental health assessment as Exhibit A. He attached my mother's video documentation as Exhibit B. He attached the photographs from Solange's laptop as Exhibit C. Caspian was served at his architectural firm at 3:20 in the afternoon. He called me 11 times that evening. I did not answer any of them. I sat on the hotel bed, and I nursed my daughter, and I did not feel afraid. The emergency hearing was held 3 days later. The judge, the Honorable Marisol Echeverria Bramwell, had spent 21 years on the family court bench and had a reputation for moving quickly when children were involved. She read the filings, she read the exhibits. She looked at Solange, who had attended the hearing in a charcoal suit and pearls. She looked at Caspian, who had attended in an expression of practiced grief. She looked at me, holding my daughter against my chest, because I was still breastfeeding and Renly had not been more than 10 feet from me in 72 hours. Then Judge Echeverria Bramwell asked Yanis to play the video from Exhibit B. The video played in open court. The video showed Solange feeding Renly formula from a prepared bottle on day 8, 16 seconds, with the audio clearly capturing her humming what sounded like a lullaby and whispering, "Soon, my love, very soon." The judge watched the video twice. She asked Solange's attorney whether his client wished to offer an explanation. The attorney said his client was simply trying to help her sister-in-law. The judge asked Solange directly, on the record, whether she had been told by Renly's mother that no one was permitted to feed Renly formula. Solange hesitated. She said she had not understood that the instruction was absolute. The judge took her glasses off. She placed them on the bench in front of her in the way I would later learn she did when she had heard enough. She granted my emergency motion. She granted me temporary sole legal and physical custody of Renly. She ordered Caspian to vacate the marital home within 48 hours. She ordered Solange to have no unsupervised contact with Renly pending further proceedings. She also ordered something I had not asked for. She ordered the local district attorney's office to be notified of the documented transition plan emails, because in her professional opinion, the pattern of conduct described in those emails raised serious concerns about a coordinated effort to circumvent the lawful parental rights of a recovering postpartum mother. And she wanted those concerns evaluated by the appropriate authorities. Solange's face went a color I had not previously known a human face could turn. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. Caspian sat very still in his chair, looking down at his lap. The judge banged her gavel. Yanis walked me out of the courtroom with one hand at my back, and my mother walked behind me carrying Renly's diaper bag, and when we got to the car, I cried for the first time in 2 weeks, quietly, into the top of my daughter's small, soft head. Caspian called me that evening. I answered, because Yanis had told me I could, with the recording function on my phone active and a notepad in my hand to document the conversation. Caspian told me, in a voice that was no longer calm or clinical, that I had destroyed his sister. He told me that Solange had given up her entire life to raise him, and that he could not abandon her now. He told me that he wanted to fix things between us, but that I needed to withdraw the motion and let Solange be the aunt she deserves to be. I listened to him talk. When he had finished, I gave him exactly 2 choices. The first option was that he could enter intensive individual therapy with a court-approved family therapist who specialized in enmeshment, sever the transition plan arrangement with his sister in writing, and accept that I would be making every decision regarding Renly until I felt safe again. The second option was that he could continue defending his sister's behavior, in which case I would proceed with the full custody case Yanis was already preparing, I would proceed with the divorce filing my mother had drafted, and I would cooperate fully with the district attorney's office in any investigation they chose to open. I told him he had 72 hours to decide. I hung up the phone. I sat on the hotel bed with my mother on one side of me and my sleeping daughter on the other, and I waited. He called back 41 hours later. He had chosen the first option, he said. He had already left a message with the family therapist Yanis had recommended. He had already sent Solange a letter, drafted by his attorney, formally ending all transition arrangements. He told me he was sorry. He cried. I did not believe him. I did not have to believe him for the choice to be the right one. Yanis told me that whether or not Caspian was being sincere did not actually matter for purposes of the custody arrangement, because the conditions I had set required compliance, not belief. The therapist Caspian was now seeing was Dr. Bartholomew Iwobi Sandoval, a clinical psychologist with 23 years of experience in family systems work, who had agreed to provide monthly progress reports to my attorney as a condition of Caspian's continued unsupervised visitation with Renly. The first report, 3 weeks in, was guarded. The second report, 2 months in, was more optimistic. Dr. Iwobi Sandoval wrote that Caspian was beginning to understand the difference between gratitude and enmeshment, and the price his marriage and child had paid for his inability to distinguish between them. The district attorney's office opened an inquiry the week after the emergency hearing. They subpoenaed Solange's emails, her laptop, her communications with the family attorney she had been working with, and her communications with the private nanny placement service. They found, among other things, that Solange had been making inquiries with 2 adoption attorneys about the legal mechanisms for voluntary guardianship transfers for almost 3 months before Renly was born. They found that she had prepaid a 1-year retainer at a pediatric concierge medical practice in her own neighborhood under Renly's name. They found a draft of a letter to Renly's eventual school, signed Mother. They did not charge Solange with a crime, because under our state's laws, the conduct, while disturbing, did not rise to a chargeable offense. But the file remained open. The investigation, however, had consequences that the law had not directly imposed. Solange's employer, the private equity firm, where she had been chief financial officer for 9 years, had a strict ethics policy regarding conduct that brings the firm into disrepute, and the firm's compliance department had received an anonymous tip about the investigation. Solange was placed on administrative leave. The firm conducted an internal review. The review uncovered nothing related to her financial management of the firm, which was, by all accounts, impeccable. But the review uncovered enough about her personal conduct to make the firm's senior partners, in a private meeting Solange was not invited to, decide that her continued employment was not in the firm's best interests. She was offered a separation agreement. She signed it. She did not work again at her level for almost 3 years. Caspian's architectural firm was harder for the consequences to reach because Caspian was a founding partner and could not be removed without a buyout that would have collapsed the firm. But the partners had known Solange for a decade. They had attended her birthdays. They had been to her apartment. The story moved through the small community of professional Caspian inhabited within weeks, and his major institutional clients, 2 universities and a hospital system, quietly redirected their work to other firms. The firm's revenue dropped by almost 40% in the first year. The other partners eventually negotiated Caspian's buyout. He left the firm he had founded and started over as a sole practitioner, working out of a small office in a less prestigious part of the city. He had to sell our house to pay the divorce settlement. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. He saw Renly every other weekend, supervised at first, then unsupervised after Dr. Iwobi Sandoval submitted his 18th monthly progress report, and Giannis was satisfied that Caspian's therapeutic work was genuine. The court ordered that Solange was permitted no contact with Renly until Renly was 18 and could decide for herself whether to pursue a relationship. Caspian, to his credit, did not fight this order. He had, by the end of his 2nd year of therapy, written me a letter 12 pages long, in which he had described in painful detail his understanding of what had happened, what his sister had done, and what he had allowed her to do because he had been unable to separate his love for his sister from his obligations as a husband and father. I read the letter once. I gave it to my attorney for the file. I did not respond. I did, however, save the letter in a manila folder in the back of my desk drawer, alongside Dr. Nziogwu Ashford's original assessment and the photographs from Solange's laptop and Judge Echeverria Bramwell's order. I saved it for Renly in case she ever asked one day what her father had said. I knew there were things she would want to know, eventually. I knew there were questions she would have about why her aunt was not in her life, about why the house she had been born in was not the house she remembered, about why her grandmother, Rosaline, had moved into the small in-law unit behind ours and never moved out. I would tell her the truth, not all at once, not before she was ready, but the truth when she asked, because the truth was the thing that had saved us. Renly turned 2 on a warm afternoon in June. We had a small party in the backyard with 12 people. My mother, Giannis and his wife, who had become our friends, Octavia from the hospital, who had given Renly her first real teddy bear, Caspian, who was permitted to attend with my approval and who arrived early to help set up and stayed late to clean up and did not, at any point, attempt to overstep the careful, deliberate co-parenting boundaries we had spent 2 years building. Dr. Nziogwu Ashford sent flowers. Dr. Iwobi Sandoval sent a card. Renly, who had her father's dark eyes and my stubborn jaw, walked around the backyard on her short, determined legs and showed every guest the small wooden duck she had been carrying since breakfast. She was unbothered. She was loved. She did not know what she had almost lost. She would never need to know everything. I sat on the back porch that evening after the guests had gone home, with my mother in the chair next to me and a glass of wine in my hand, and my daughter asleep upstairs in the room that was entirely her own. The light was fading over the small garden Caspian had helped me plant the previous spring, the one with the herbs and the lavender and the small marker for the kitten we had buried in the fall. My mother reached over and put her hand on mine. She told me, in her quiet, lawyerly way, that she was proud of me. She told me she had spent 31 years prosecuting cases of people who took from other people what was not theirs to take, and that watching me refuse to let it happen to me had been one of the proudest moments of her life. I asked her that evening what she thought had gone wrong. What had made Solange believe in some part of herself that my daughter belonged to her? My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she told me that some people, when they cannot have the thing they want most in the world, decide that the universe has made a mistake, and they spend the rest of their lives trying to correct it. She told me that Solange had probably loved Caspian very deeply when she had raised him, and that something in her had never recovered from that ending. She told me that grief that does not find a healthy place to go does not disappear. It looks for somewhere else to live. Sometimes it tries to live inside someone else's child. My mother sipped her wine. She said, "She did not get to live inside yours." I held her hand. The light went down.